The price of fame wasn't just ambition. It was their bodies, their dignity, and their careers. Meet the 15 old Hollywood actresses who dared to say no and paid the ultimate price. Their stories are a shocking exposé of an industry built on power, corruption, and silence. Today, we reveal the truth behind Hollywood's darkest secret. Get ready for a journey into the untold stories of courage, defiance, and tragedy that shaped the industry. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge's life and career read like a cautionary tale, wrapped in both triumph and tragedy. Born into a world determined to keep her on the fringes, she clawed her way to the very center of the Hollywood spotlight. When Dorothy became the first African-American woman ever nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, she did more than break a barrier. She shattered the illusion that talent knew color or class. The world saw her beauty and heard her voice, but few truly knew the silent battles she fought behind closed doors. Inside the studio system, Dandridge found herself caught in a web of invisible expectations. Hollywood executives, almost always white and male, regularly extended invitations for business dinners, veiling ulterior motives behind the facade of professional opportunity. If she politely declined, her scripts would vanish. If she accepted but dared to keep the meeting strictly professional, she was dismissed and labeled as uncooperative. The message was clear. In Hollywood, saying no could cost you everything. The cruelty didn't end there. Dandridge once turned down a powerful producer, only to see a dream role stripped of its substance and reduced to a background part. Punishment served as a supposed opportunity. It was this kind of calculated retaliation that followed her throughout her career. Each refusal, each moment she insisted on being treated with dignity, carried the risk of erasure. Outside the studio gates, Dandridge's personal life suffered just as much as her professional one. The constant struggle to protect herself in a world determined to exploit her talent left her increasingly isolated. Despite her immense contributions, Dandridge died alone, deeply in debt, and largely unrecognized by the very industry she had helped change. Hollywood's price for her integrity was her invisibility. Yet, her courage endures as a reminder of all the voices forced into silence for daring to demand respect. Eleanor Parker. Eleanor Parker was often described as the woman of 1,000 faces, a testament to her uncanny ability to disappear into any role, heroine or villain, saint or sinner. Yet, behind the chameleon-like facade, Parker was fiercely independent, refusing to be anyone's puppet off the screen. While her career sparkled with critical acclaim and box office success, a more insidious drama unfolded beyond the camera's gaze, one that would ultimately shape and then shatter her trajectory. Parker's trouble began with the kind of late-night invitation that every actress in old Hollywood learned to fear. A powerful executive, under the pretense of a script revision, requested her presence in a private office after hours. Eleanor Parker, with poise and a quiet resolve, declined. For some, that would be the end of the story. But in Hollywood, that single act of resistance carried unspoken consequences. The next day, the air seemed to shift. Roles she'd been promised evaporated. Marketing budgets for her films were mysteriously slashed. No explanation, just a sudden, cold silence. What stung most was not the absence of scandal, but the absence of acknowledgement. Parker wasn't embroiled in controversy. She didn't make headlines. She simply faded from conversations about the next big picture. Insiders would whisper that she was once the first choice for roles that later made other women icons. Yet each time she asserted her boundaries, her name vanished from the running. It was as if Hollywood had pressed a mute button on her very existence. In her private life, Parker shouldered the weight of these slights with characteristic grace. She confided to close friends her frustration with a system that demanded blind obedience, not artistry. For true film lovers, Eleanor Parker's legacy is defined not by her disappearance, but by her courage. Refusing to compromise her dignity, she exposed the underbelly of an industry that prized submission above all else. Her story remains a warning and an inspiration, proving that sometimes the greatest roles are those played outside the public eye. Ashley Judd. Ashley Judd's story may be more recent than the golden age of Hollywood, but it serves as a haunting echo of how little has truly changed in the corridors of power. In the 1990s, Ashley was a rising star. Her performances in critically acclaimed films like Kiss the Girls and Double Jeopardy established her as one of Hollywood's most promising leading ladies. Audiences loved her authenticity and strength. But behind the scenes, she was facing a battle for her very autonomy. The turning point came when Ashley, like so many before her, was summoned to a meeting with one of Hollywood's most influential producers, Harvey Weinstein. The encounter, under the pretense of a business meeting, quickly turned inappropriate. Ashley resisted his advances, refusing to barter her integrity for a role or a favor. The rejection angered Weinstein, a man unaccustomed to hearing no. What followed was not a dramatic scandal, but something far more insidious. A campaign of quiet retaliation. Suddenly the roles dried up. Prominent directors like Peter Jackson were advised by Weinstein's company that Judd was difficult and should not be cast. The doors that had once been open slammed shut, not because of a lack of talent or professionalism, but because Ashley had dared to set boundaries. For years, she struggled to understand why her once soaring career had stalled, only to discover the truth through the Me Too movement, which she helped ignite. Ashley Judd's courage in coming forward publicly was not just about her own story. It was about shining a light on a pattern that had persisted since the earliest days of the industry. Her willingness to risk everything for the truth inspired other women to step out of the shadows. Ashley's advocacy has transformed her from just another name on a blacklist to a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope for those still fighting to be heard. Her story proves that while the cost of integrity in Hollywood is steep, the legacy of courage can never be erased. Kim Novak. Kim Novak's presence on screen was magnetic, ethereal, enigmatic, and utterly unforgettable. She became the face of 1950s Hollywood glamour, captivating audiences with her performances in classics like Vertigo and Picnic. But Novak's elegance was more than skin deep. Beneath the veneer of the studio-manufactured Golden Girl was a woman fiercely determined to live by her own rules, even as the Hollywood machine tried to break her spirit. As Columbia Pictures' prized asset, Novak's image was tightly controlled by the studio and its powerful executives. Invitations to exclusive dinners, private meetings after hours, and demands to shape her personal life for public consumption were all part of the package. The price for saying no. A slow and calculated erasure. Novak declined to attend after-hours meetings, sidestepped offers to reshape her personal affairs, and rebuffed the constant pressure to be more available for certain executives' attention. The consequences were as predictable as they were cruel. Leading roles once offered to her began going to others. The whispers started. Words like difficult, ungrateful, and aloof began to circulate. Her star status was gradually undermined, not by a lack of talent or popularity, but by a refusal to be someone else's pawn. Columbia Pictures, once eager to parade her as their starlet, started assigning her smaller, less significant roles. Eventually, the studio's silence grew deafening, and Novak faded from the spotlight. Years later, Novak would look back on those days and explain simply, "They never forgave me for not playing their game." She didn't name names or create a scandal. Instead, she chose to walk away with her dignity intact, even if it meant the end of her meteoric career. In the years since, Kim Novak's story has become a symbol of the price Hollywood demands for nonconformity. Her legacy is more than her films. It is the quiet, unwavering message that true artistry and self-respect can never be bought or sold. Linda Darnell. Linda Darnell's story is a testament to both breathtaking talent and relentless adversity. Rising to fame as a teenage starlet, Darnell possessed a luminous beauty that seemed to promise Hollywood stardom on her own terms. But from the very beginning, her career was shaped by forces far beyond her control. At just 16, she found herself surrounded by powerful men whose interests extended far beyond her acting abilities. Her mother, determined to secure her daughter's success at any cost, often finalized deals without Linda's knowledge, placing her in situations she never chose for herself. As Darnell matured, she became increasingly aware of the hidden price attached to every opportunity. Auditions and contracts were frequently accompanied by unspoken conditions, demands for personal favors from producers and studio executives. For years, Linda struggled under the weight of these expectations, feeling both trapped and voiceless. The turning point came when she finally summoned the courage to assert her independence, rejecting the advances of a prominent producer who had promised her the role of a lifetime. The industry's retaliation was swift and merciless. The coveted role was handed to another actress, one deemed more flexible. Darnell watched as her hard-earned opportunities slipped through her fingers, replaced by a suffocating silence. Scripts that should have come her way were suddenly rewritten or recast, and her name faded from the lists of Hollywood's brightest prospects. In her later years, Linda Darnell found solace in the company of friends, often reflecting on the films that could have been hers. She lived out her final days with a former secretary, her once dazzling career reduced to a series of bittersweet memories replayed on late-night television. Tragically, Darnell's life was cut short by a house fire. An accident, some say, but others believe it marked the end of a long and weary struggle. Her legacy remains not just in her unforgettable performances, but in her steadfast refusal to exchange her self-respect for stardom. Darnell's fall from grace was no accident. It was the cost of daring to say no. Kathy O'Donnell. Kathy O'Donnell's presence on screen was something quietly powerful. She brought a deep sensitivity and haunting melancholy to her roles, making her unforgettable to those who truly watched her work. Yet, despite this unique gift, her career in Hollywood was startlingly brief, her name fading almost entirely from the industry's collective memory. This wasn't the result of scandal or controversy, nor was it due to any lack of talent. The truth, known to only a few, was that O'Donnell was quietly blacklisted for refusing to play by the unwritten rules of Hollywood's casting couch. Unlike some of her peers who went public with their struggles or fought loudly for their dignity, O'Donnell's resistance was silent. Offers would come her way, sometimes with the promise of career-defining roles, but they were often accompanied by stipulations that had nothing to do with acting. She was expected to comply with personal demands, to curry favor with influential men, to become amenable in ways that had nothing to do with her artistry. O'Donnell refused, time and again, choosing to protect her self-respect over her career advancement. The response from the industry was swift and absolute. Her name was quietly erased from casting lists. Calls from her agents stopped altogether. The roles she had once been considered perfect for were suddenly given to others, women willing to play along with the system's demands. O'Donnell made no public statements, issued no complaints. She simply faded away, her career ending with a whisper rather than a bang. She passed away prematurely at just 46 years old. Her remarkable performances in films like The Best Years of Our Lives and They Live by Night, largely overlooked by a Hollywood eager to forget those who refuse to play its game. Today, Kathy O'Donnell's story serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the bravest resistance is the quietest, and that the cost of integrity in Hollywood often goes unrecognized until it's far too late. Maureen O'Hara. Maureen O'Hara's career sparkled with the kind of charisma and strength that set her apart from her peers. The Irish-born beauty was renowned for her fiery red hair, striking green eyes, and commanding screen presence in classics such as The Quiet Man and Miracle on 34th Street. Yet, O'Hara's appeal was never just skin-deep. She was celebrated for her unshakable integrity and her refusal to let anyone, no matter how powerful, compromise her values. In the rigidly patriarchal Hollywood of the 1940s and 1950s, this steadfastness made O'Hara both a star and a target. Executives and producers, accustomed to having their every whim indulged, soon discovered that O'Hara was different. The moment that changed everything came during what was supposed to be a routine business meeting. When a studio head made an inappropriate advance, O'Hara's response was swift and unmistakable. She firmly rejected him, making it clear that her career would never be traded for personal compromise. This act of defiance would haunt her for years to come. The retaliation was both immediate and insidious. The phone, once constantly ringing with new opportunities, fell silent. Roles she had been promised evaporated. Even worse, a whisper campaign began, branding her as difficult and uncooperative. In a town built on reputation, such labels could be deadly. O'Hara soon found herself fighting tooth and nail for every new role, her undeniable talent suddenly insufficient to shield her from the black cloud that had descended. Despite these obstacles, O'Hara refused to back down or conform. She continued to work, sometimes against incredible odds, and ultimately outlasted many of those who tried to silence her. Even decades later, O'Hara spoke openly about her experiences, revealing the dark undercurrents of an industry that demanded silence and submission from its brightest stars. Today, she stands as a beacon of courage and authenticity, a woman who chose self-respect over superstardom and whose story still inspires those unwilling to sacrifice their principles for fame. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake's story is a blend of overnight superstardom and sudden, inexplicable downfall, one of Hollywood's most striking cautionary tales. She burst onto the scene in the 1940s, her peekaboo hairstyle becoming an instant national trend, copied by millions of women. With her sultry voice and mysterious gaze, she headlined film noir classics like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia. At her peak, Lake was not just a movie star. She was a phenomenon, captivating the public imagination with effortless charisma. But the shine of her stardom hid a relentless battle behind the scenes. Veronica Lake was outspoken and unafraid to speak her mind on set, an attitude that won her admirers among audiences but few friends in the boardrooms of Hollywood. She refused to play the part of the compliant starlet. The defining moment came when she turned down a producer's invitation to a private meeting under the guise of discussing her contract. She knew what was expected, and she wouldn't comply. The industry's retribution was immediate. Almost overnight, Lake was labeled as difficult, unstable, and uninsurable, a death sentence in the film business. Rumors about her mental health and reliability were spread by those in power, all to discredit her resolve. The situation worsened when she was pressured to stage a romance with a male co-star to quell gossip about her personal life. Again, she refused, valuing her dignity over publicity stunts. With each act of defiance, Lake's opportunities evaporated. Contracts were canceled, agents dropped her, and the parts that once seemed guaranteed vanished. By her 30s, the former icon was struggling just to make ends meet, eventually working as a waitress to support herself, a fate unthinkable for someone once at the top of the industry. Lake's tragic decline wasn't the result of scandal or personal failing, but the direct consequence of refusing to bend to a system that punished independence and honesty in women. When she died, few in the industry remembered her, but the story of Veronica Lake endures as a somber lesson. Sometimes, Hollywood erases those who refuse to play along. Yet, in her refusal, she achieved a quiet victory. Her story reminds us that dignity has a price, but its value endures beyond the reach of power. Judy Garland. Judy Garland remains one of the most iconic and beloved performers in Hollywood history. Her voice, haunting, vulnerable, and powerful, resonated with audiences worldwide, making her a legend before she was even an adult. But the golden glow of Garland's career masked a darker, more troubling reality. From her earliest days as a child star, Judy was treated less as a person and more as an asset to be controlled and exploited. The manipulation began at an almost unimaginable young age. Studio executives dictated everything: her hairstyle, her weight, her friends, even her very movements. She was fed a steady diet of pills, some to keep her thin, others to keep her awake, and still more to put her to sleep. Garland's every moment was monitored, her innocence sacrificed to the demands of the spotlight. As Judy grew older, the pressures only intensified. Powerful executives, emboldened by their authority, began to offer conditional favors, opportunities for new roles or promotions that came with strings attached. When Garland, by now a weary adult despite her youth, began to resist and assert her boundaries, the cost was immediate. Studio heads labeled her as unstable and unreliable, spreading whispers that she was difficult or impossible to work with. In reality, her so-called unreliability was nothing more than a refusal to participate in the power games that had nothing to do with artistry and everything to do with control. The industry didn't oust her with fanfare or scandal. They simply stopped answering her calls. The dazzling offers disappeared. The roles she made famous were handed to others, and Garland was left to pick up the pieces. Her later life was marked by a painful struggle to reclaim her career and personal happiness. Yet, through all the heartbreak, Judy Garland never fully surrendered her integrity. She remains a symbol of both Hollywood's magic and its deep, destructive undercurrents. Her courage to finally say no cost her dearly, but it also lit a path for others who refused to be complicit in their own exploitation. Dolores Hart. Dolores Hart's journey in Hollywood began with all the hallmarks of a classic success story. With striking beauty, earnest charm, and undeniable talent, she quickly ascended to leading lady status, starring opposite none other than Elvis Presley in Loving You. She became known as the girl who kissed Elvis, her future mapped out by adoring fans and studio executives alike. Yet, behind the glitz and promise, Hart was grappling with a reality that would forever change the course of her life. As her career blossomed, so did the expectations placed upon her by those in power. Opportunities in Hollywood rarely came without strings attached, and Hart found herself facing a series of offers laced with personal and inappropriate conditions. Studio heads and producers made it clear: advancement required compliance with demands that crossed the line from professional to deeply personal. The pressure was suffocating, the environment increasingly unsafe for a young woman who valued her dignity. Instead of submitting, Hart made a decision that stunned the industry. She left Hollywood, turning her back on fame and fortune. For many, her sudden withdrawal from the public eye appeared to be a spiritual awakening, a dramatic conversion to religious life. In truth, as Hart herself later revealed, the driving force behind her departure was a need to escape the toxic hypocrisy that permeated the studios. She didn't run from the spotlight. She ran from the price required to remain in it. Dolores Hart found peace and fulfillment far from the cameras, embracing a life as a Benedictine nun. The tranquility of the convent was a stark contrast to the relentless pressures of Hollywood. Hart's story is not one of failure, but of radical self-preservation, a testament to the power of choosing one's own path, even when it means leaving everything behind. Her legacy remains unique. A woman who proved that sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is to simply walk away with your soul intact. Susan George. Susan George, with her alluring beauty and intense screen presence, was a sensation in the late 1960s and early 1970s. She captivated audiences in films such as Straw Dogs and Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, building a reputation as both a sex symbol and a serious actress with undeniable talent. Hollywood took notice, and Susan seemed destined for a career filled with starring roles and international acclaim. But as her career climbed, she encountered a hidden system that would ultimately decide her fate, not based on talent or box office draw, but on her willingness to submit to powerful men behind the scenes. It was an era when actresses were often expected to play the game, accept invitations, attend private parties, and form closer relationships with influential producers and executives. For Susan, the line was drawn when she was offered a major contract, the biggest opportunity of her career. The contract, however, came with strings attached, implicit expectations for off-screen intimacy with members of the production team. The message was clear. Her future as a leading lady was conditional, her talent secondary to her compliance. Susan George refused. She would not exchange her self-worth for stardom, no matter how tempting the promise of fame. The consequences of her decision were immediate and irreversible. Seemingly overnight, the offers disappeared. Casting calls stopped. There was no public scandal, no tabloid drama, just a sudden, chilling silence from an industry that had previously courted her. In later interviews, Susan acknowledged the cost of her integrity, stating that she knew she had shut the biggest door available to her in Hollywood. What made Susan's case particularly painful was the complete absence of acknowledgement from the industry. She wasn't blacklisted in any official sense. Rather, she became invisible. Hollywood didn't fire her. It simply stopped seeing her at all. Yet, in choosing integrity over compliance, Susan George set an example for others. Her story stands as a stark reminder that even the most dazzling career can be extinguished in a moment when a woman chooses her self-respect over a corrupt system's demands. Mira Sorvino. Mira Sorvino's story serves as a chilling reminder that the casting couch culture of old Hollywood lingered far into the modern era. Bursting onto the scene in the 1990s, Sorvino quickly made a name for herself with her breakout performance in Mighty Aphrodite, for which she won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Her future seemed limitless, with directors and studios clamoring for her talent, intelligence, and unique charm. Yet, beneath the surface, an invisible war was being waged for her autonomy, one that would cost her dearly for simply saying no. At the height of her career, Sorvino encountered the advances of powerful producer Harvey Weinstein. When she rejected his unwanted propositions, the retaliation was both subtle and devastating. Roles that had been verbally promised to her mysteriously evaporated. Directors later admitted they had been told by Weinstein's company that Sorvino was difficult to work with, a deliberate smear intended to sideline her. The acclaimed director Peter Jackson revealed that, during casting for The Lord of the Rings, he was specifically discouraged from hiring Sorvino because of these whispered lies. For Mira, the experience was bewildering and painful. She watched her once blazing career slow to a crawl for reasons she couldn't initially comprehend. As the truth came out through the Me Too movement, Sorvino realized she had been systematically blacklisted, not for any professional failing, but for refusing to be complicit in Weinstein's abuse of power. Hollywood's unwritten code was clear: comply or disappear. Despite the heartbreak, Sorvino transformed her pain into activism. She became one of the most vocal advocates for survivors of harassment and abuse, using her voice to demand transparency and reform in an industry that had always punished women for their resistance. Her courage helped to shatter the silence, opening doors for future generations of actresses. Sorvino's legacy is not merely one of loss, but of empowerment, proof that standing up to injustice, even when it costs you everything, can help change the world. Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan's career trajectory is a powerful testament to both the darkness and the resilience found in Hollywood's shadows. Known for her striking presence and unforgettable roles in films like Scream and the cult classic series Charmed, McGowan stood out as an actress who refused to be molded by the industry's expectations. But her defiance, her voice, and her unwavering sense of justice would ultimately put her in the crosshairs of one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and set the stage for a cultural reckoning. In the late 1990s, at the height of her fame, McGowan was assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, an act that would haunt her both personally and professionally for years to come. When she refused to accept hush money or keep silent about what had happened, she was subjected to a relentless campaign of intimidation, threats, and, most insidiously, professional exile. Roles she would have easily won disappeared, offers for new projects dried up, and former collaborators stopped returning her calls. Despite her immense talent and past successes, McGowan quickly found herself on the outside looking in. The industry, eager to protect its own, painted her as trouble and controversial. She was offered hush money again and again, but turned it down each time, choosing her dignity and the truth over career security. In her powerful memoir, Brave, McGowan would later reveal how systematic and well-organized this blacklisting was, exposing not only Weinstein's actions, but the entire apparatus that had enabled and protected him for decades. Rather than fading away, Rose McGowan became one of the loudest voices of the Me Too movement, inspiring countless other women and men to step forward with their own stories. Her activism helped to rip away Hollywood's golden mask, showing the world the high cost paid by those who dared to speak out. McGowan's courage did not come without sacrifice, but in refusing to be silenced, she became a symbol of defiance, hope, and the ongoing struggle for justice. Annabella Sciorra. Annabella Sciorra's path through Hollywood began with promise and acclaim. Her performances in films like Jungle Fever and The Hand That Rocks the Cradle revealed an actress of rare depth and vulnerability, earning her a reputation as one of the industry's most compelling talents. Yet, behind the accolades, Sciorra was fighting a private battle against a force much greater than any character she portrayed, a battle that would ultimately reshape her life and career. In the early 1990s, Sciorra was attacked by Harvey Weinstein. The trauma she endured did not end with the assault. When she rejected Weinstein's continued advances and refused to remain silent about his actions, the backlash began. Unlike the dramatic confrontations depicted in the movies, the industry's retaliation was subtle, pervasive, and devastating. Leading roles and lucrative offers became scarce. Casting agents, once eager to work with her, suddenly went silent. Projects she had been promised evaporated without explanation. The effect on Sciorra was profound. She fell into a period of depression and anxiety, struggling to understand why her thriving career had ground to a halt. At the time, the true reason remained shrouded in whispers and industry gossip, the reality known only to a select few. Years later, during Weinstein's highly publicized criminal trial, Sciorra's testimony proved pivotal. She bravely recounted the details of her assault and the professional destruction that followed, exposing the patterns of abuse and blacklisting that had silenced so many women for so long. Annabella Sciorra's courage in coming forward, even after decades of suffering and silence, helped to validate the experiences of countless survivors and shift the public's understanding of Hollywood's power dynamics. Her willingness to speak her truth, despite knowing the cost, demonstrates a resilience that transcends the screen. Sciorra's legacy is now defined not only by her remarkable performances, but by her vital role in challenging a culture of impunity and paving the way for a more just and accountable industry. Peggy Ann Garner. Peggy Ann Garner's career is one of the most bittersweet in Hollywood's long history of rising stars and sudden disappearances. As a child, Garner was a sensation, a prodigy whose performances won the hearts of critics and audiences alike. Her talent was undeniable. At just 13 years old, she was awarded a special juvenile Oscar for her unforgettable work in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Hollywood studios celebrated her innocence and charm, crafting a carefully managed image of the ideal young star. But as Garner grew older, the tone of her interactions with the industry began to change, and with it, her entire future. In the golden era of Hollywood, there existed an unspoken rule. Young actresses, no matter how talented, were expected to please not only the public, but the men in charge. As she transitioned from child roles to adult stardom, Peggy Ann Garner began to receive offers with implicit and sometimes explicit conditions attached. When she made it clear that she would not conform, would not attend private meetings, or acquiesce to the inappropriate requests of powerful executives, the invitations to auditions and roles dwindled, then stopped altogether. The transformation was as swift as it was brutal. Suddenly, the scripts dried up, the phone stopped ringing, and Garner's once bright name faded from the marquees. No public explanation was given, and no scandal broke. The system simply erased her. The most tragic part of her story is the quiet understanding she developed at a young age, that her refusal to be anything but a professional, to give nothing more than her performance, was the reason her career was being cut short. Unlike others who may have staged public battles or sought attention for their plight, Garner slipped quietly into obscurity. She was never granted the second chance her talent deserved, and Hollywood, eager to forget those who refused to play its game, left her story largely untold. Peggy Ann Garner's legacy is a silent testimony to the hidden cost of maintaining one's principles in an industry where compliance was often valued above all else. Her courage in the face of systemic exploitation continues to resonate as a reminder of all the voices lost, not through failure, but through the refusal to surrender dignity. Thank you for watching as we revealed the true stories behind 15 old Hollywood actresses banned for not getting laid with powerful men. If these stories moved you, shocked you, or made you think differently about the golden age of Hollywood, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more hidden histories and untold truths. Your support helps us shine a light on the voices Hollywood tried to silence. Join us as we continue to uncover the real stories behind the stars. And remember, every share keeps their legacies alive.